And for the first time, we're seeing the arrival of an American serviceman who was killed in action. The body of Air Force Staff Sergeant Philip Myers flew into Dover Air Force Base in Delaware last night. He was killed by an enemy bomb in Afghanistan 2 days ago. Now, it was largely a silent ceremony. All you could hear was the clicking of camera shutters and the orders to the troops carrying the coffin. Joining me live from the Pentagon, NBC's Jim Miklaszewski. Jim, tell me why it's significant that the president chose to lift this ban on covering the arrivals of America's war dead.
Well, you know, what it does is lift an 18-year-old ban against that media coverage, which critics believe pretty strongly was a political decision first by the first President Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, supported and confirmed by President Clinton, and then the second President Bush. And critics think that it was a political decision because in any time during an armed conflict, when you have large numbers of war dead returning home and the video cameras would record for history the numbers of coffins, one after another, coming off the airplane, that if that occurred over a prolonged period of time, that could undermine public support for any kind of armed conflict that was underway. So that is believed to be the political decision behind it. But, you know, when Secretary Gates took over here from Donald Rumsfeld, he started to look at that and was thinking, well, maybe we don't need to have that in place. And when President Obama took office, he asked the secretary to look into it to see if it could be lifted. And what they decided to do was lift the ban, but only with the permission of the families of those fallen. And in this case, this 30-year-old Staff Sergeant Philip Myers, an Air Force Staff Sergeant who was awarded a Bronze Star for his service in Iraq, killed just last week in Afghanistan. His family was contacted. They said, yes, indeed, the media should be allowed to cover it.
So logistically speaking, if you have multiple coffins coming back to the United States, you may have differing family views on whether or not reporters and photographers can be there, will be allowed there to cover it. Have they figured out a way around that?
That would very much complicate matters, and if any one family decides that they do not want media coverage of their loved one, then the media would not be permitted to record what they call the transfer case, a casket in effect, flag draped, coming off the airplane, being loaded onto the vehicles and taken away to the mortuary there at Dover Air Force Base. They could separate them, but if there are large numbers, I suspect who do not want coverage, that coverage would be banned in that regard. And you know, the media decided long ago they too would respect the family's wishes. But when Secretary Gates looked into this, one of the reasons given for banning media coverage is that the families didn't want the media there when their loved ones returned. But what Secretary Gates found out when he looked into it, that the families were never consulted with to begin with. So again, it goes back to the idea that this was a political decision not to allow coverage. Now that decision is placed in the hands of the families, and that ban has been lifted.
Jim, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Okay, Contessa.